listen, you'll hear examples of personal letters and memories from the pandemic. But first, some facts about the 1918 pandemic. The Spanish flu was one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. It lasted from February 1918 to April 1920, with a total of 4 waves hitting the entire globe. 500 million people worldwide were infected, 1/3 of the population. And although actual death tolls are not known, an estimated 17 to 100 million were killed. During the first wave, which lasted from February to July 1918, the flu behaved much like the typical flu. The symptoms were similar and mostly affected the weak and elderly, much like with COVID-19. However, with the second most deadly wave hitting in August that year, young, healthy people under the age of 65 became the most affected, accounting for 99% of deaths in the US. This pandemic was further complicated by World War I, which lasted from July 1914 to November 1918. Because of international troop movements, the stress of war on soldiers, and the cramped quarters, the outbreak was easily spread across the globe. The war also gave it its misleading name. As Spain was neutral during the war, it was one of the only countries that didn't implement wartime news censorship. So most of the news coverage of the flu came out of Spain. There were some similarities to COVID-19, even 100 years ago. Quarantines and mask wearing were enforced, although not until the second wave hit. Mask wearing was also protested, most notably by our very own Anti-Mask League of San Francisco. Essential services and public transportation were restricted. Schools, churches, and other gathering places were closed, and large gatherings banned. Doctors' warnings in January 1918 were ignored, and the flu started spreading in March. Government lies and denial were common, and conspiracy theories were rampant. Sound familiar? After the second wave subsided in December, a third wave hit from January to June 1919. It was likely started when a maritime quarantine in Australia was lifted too early. It spread to the US and Europe and affected Spain, Serbia, Mexico, and Great Britain. It seemed to be localized to a handful of big cities in the US, including San Francisco, and the death toll was in the tens of thousands here. A fourth wave hit in 1920 in New York, the UK, Austria, Scandinavia, Peru, and Japan, but it subsided by April. We will hear more about how the Spanish flu finally ended and how we will look to our own future at the conclusion of this program. Now, let's hear some stories, poems, songs, and firsthand accounts from that difficult time in history.
My Antonia by Willa Cather. My Antonia is the story of 2 childhood friends, Jim Burden and Antonia Schmierda, who grew up in the same small town in Nebraska. The book tells their stories of the childhood and adolescence and how, as often happens, they drifted apart as adulthood responsibilities take precedence. I pick up the story after many years have passed. I told Antonia I would come back, but life intervened. It was 20 years before I kept my promise. I heard of her from time to time, that she married. Very soon after I last saw her, they were poor and had a large family. Perhaps it was cowardice that kept me away so long. My business took me west several times every year, and it was always in the back of my mind that I would stop in Nebraska someday and go to see Antonia. But I kept putting it off until the next trip. I did not want to find her aged and broken. I really dreaded it. In the course of 20 crowded years, one part of many delusions. I did not wish to lose the early ones. I owe it to Lena Lingard that I went to see Antonia at last. Lena gave me a cheerful account of Antonia and urged me to make her a visit. You really ought to go, Jim. It would be such a satisfaction to her. Antonia has nice children, 10 or 11 of them by now. She'd love to show them to you. On my way east, I broke my journey at Hastings in Nebraska and set off with an open buggy to find the Kuzak farm. A little past midday, I saw a wide farmhouse with a red barn and an ash grove. Ahead of me, I saw two boys. When I stopped my horses opposite them, the older boy took his brother by the hand and came toward me. "Are you Mrs. Cusack's boys?" I asked. The older brother met me with intelligent gray eyes. "Yes, sir." "Well, I'm going to see her. Get in and ride up with me." He glanced at his reluctant little brother. "I guess we'd better walk, but we'll open the gate for you." Ducks and geese ran quacking along my path. White cats were sunning themselves among the yellow pumpkins on the porch steps. I looked through the wire screen into a big, light kitchen with a white floor. Two girls were washing dishes at the sink, laughing and chattering, and a little one sat on a stool playing with a rag baby. When I asked for their mother, one of the girls dropped her towel and disappeared. The older one came to the door to admit me. "Won't you come in? The mother will be here in a minute." Before I could sit in the chair she had offered me, the miracle happened. It's one of those quiet moments that clutch the heart and take more courage than the noisy, excited passages in life. Antonia came in and stood before me, a stalwart brown woman, her curly brown hair a little grizzled. It was a shock, of course. It always is to meet people after long years. We stood looking at each other. The eyes that peered anxiously at me were simply Antonia's eyes. I had seen no others like them since I looked into them last, though I had looked at so many thousands of human faces. As I confronted her, the changes grew less apparent to me, her identity stronger. She was there in the full vigor of her personality, battered but not diminished, looking at me, speaking to me in that husky, breathy voice I remembered so well. "My husband's not at home, sir. Can I do anything?" "Don't you remember me, Antonia? Have I changed so much?" And she frowned into the slanting sunlight that made her brown hair look redder than it was. Suddenly, her eyes widened. Her whole face seemed to grow broader. She caught her breath and put out her two hard-worked hands. "Why, it's Jim Burton. I can't believe it's you, sitting here in my own kitchen." I was thinking, and as I watched her introduce her children to me, how little it mattered that she had aged so. I know so many women who have kept all things that she had lost, but whose inner glow had faded. Whatever else was gone, Antonia had not lost the fire of life.
L. Frank Baum wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in 1900, and it was followed by 13 more Oz novels. The 1939 movie, The Wizard of Oz, actually took bits and pieces from several of the Oz books, including the title character of this book, The Tin Woodman of Oz, published in 1918. This excerpt is from Chapter 18. The Tin Woodman talks to himself. The Tin Woodman opened the cupboard, and on one of the shelves he discovered a head. It looked like a doll's head, only it was larger, and he soon saw it was the head of some person. It was facing the Tin Woodman, and as the cupboard door swung back, the eyes of the head slowly opened and looked at him. The Tin Woodman was not at all surprised, for in the land of Oz, one runs into magic at every turn. "Dear me," said the Tin Woodman, staring hard. "It seems as if I have met you somewhere before." "You have the advantage of me," replied the head. "I never saw you before in my life." "Still, your face is very familiar," persisted the Tin Woodman. "Pardon me, may I ask, did you ever have a body?" "Yes, at one time," answered the head, "but that is so long ago I can't remember it. Do you think that I was born just as I am, that a head would be created without a body?" "No, of course not," said the woodman. "But how did you come to lose your body?" "Well, I can't recollect the details," said the head. "For curious as it may seem to you, my memory is not good since my separation from the rest of me." How long have you been in the cupboard? Asked the woodman. I don't know. Haven't you a name? Oh, yes, said the head. I used to be called Nick Chopper when I was a woodman and cut down trees for a living. Good gracious, cried the Tin Woodman. If you're Nick Chopper's head, then you are me or I'm you. What relationship are we anyhow? Don't ask me, replied the head. For my part, I'm not anxious to claim relationship with any common manufactured article like you. You may be all right in your class, but your class isn't my class. You're tin. The poor Tin Woodman felt so bewildered that for a time he could only stare at his old head in silence. Then he said, I must admit I wasn't all that bad looking before I became tin. You are almost handsome for meat. The Tin Woodman then asked, do you remember loving a pretty Munchkin girl? No, answered the head. That is a foolish question. The heart in my body, when I had a body, might have loved someone for all I know, but a head isn't made for love. It's made to think. Oh, do you think then? I used to think. You must have been shut up in this cupboard for years and years. What have you thought about in all that time? Nothing. That's another foolish question. I have had nothing to think about except the boards on the inside of the cupboard door, and it didn't take me long to think of everything that could be, those boards that could be thought of. Then, of course, I quit thinking. Are you happy? Happy? What's that? Don't you know what happiness is? Inquired the Tin Woodman. I haven't the faintest idea where it's round or square or black or white or what it is. And I will say that I don't care. The Tin Woodman was puzzled by these answers. After a moment of thought, he declared, You belong to me. I do not, exclaimed the head. You and I are one, insisted the woodman. We've been parted, asserted the head. It would be unnatural for me to have any interest in a man made of tin. Please, close the door and leave me alone. I do not think that my old head could be so disagreeable, said the Tin Woodman. I'm quite ashamed of myself, meaning you. You ought to be glad that I have enough sense to know what my rights are, retorted the head. In this cupboard, I'm leading a simple life, peaceful and dignified. And when someone disturbs me, they are the disagreeable ones, not I. With a sigh, the Tin Woodman closed and latched the cupboard door and turned away. I'm rather surprised at my head, thought the Tin Woodman. I thought I had a more pleasant disposition when I was made of meat.
In today's pandemic, we stay connected through Zoom, email, text messaging, and social media. In 1918, people wrote letters. Throughout the program, Donna and I will read excerpts from letters donated by families from historical archives.
September 1918. At Camp Devens military base outside of Boston, 45,000 soldiers were stationed, waiting to be deployed to France. 10,000 cases of influenza had broken out at an alarming rate. The exhausted camp physician wrote a letter to his friend, another doctor. These men start with an attack of influenza, and they very rapidly develop the most vicious type of pneumonia that has ever been seen. It is horrible. It is better if someone has a friend about. I would like to find a fellow to talk to who wouldn't talk shop, but there ain't none. We eat it, sleep it, dream it, not to mention breathe it, 16 hours a day. I would be most grateful if you could send me a line or two once in a while. And I promise you, if you ever get in a fix like this, I will do the same for you.
October 15th, California. Lambert to Mama. Everything is closed here too. There is a bill in the Senate authorizing all the war workers to be released from work for the duration of this epidemic. It has not passed the House yet, but I can't help but hope that it does.
Motley by Walter de la Mare. Come, death, I have a word with thee, and thou, poor innocency, and love, a lad with a broken wing, and pity too, the fool shall sing to you as fools will sing. Ah, music has small sense, and a too soon told, and earth is old, and my poor wits are dense. Yet I have secrets, dark, my dear, to breathe you all. Come near, and lest some hideous listener tells, I'll ring my bells. They are all at war. Yes, yes, their bodies go 'neath burning sun and icy star to chanted songs of woe, dragging cold cannon through a mire of rain and blood and spouting fire. The new moon glinting hard on the eyes, wide with insanities. Hush, I use words I hardly know the meaning of. And the mute birds are glancing at love from out their shade of leaf and flower, trembling at treacheries which even in the noonday cower. Heed not what I said of frenzied hosts of men, more fools than I, on envy, hatred fed, who kill and die. Spake I not plainly then? Yet pity whispered why. Thou silly thing, off to thy daisies go. Mine was not news for child to know, and death no ears hath. He hath supped where creep eyeless worms in hushes sleep. Yet when he smiles, the hand he draws athwart his grinning jaws, faintly the thin bones rattle, and there, hearken how my bells in the air drive away care. Nay, but a dream I had of a world all mad, not simple mad, happy like me, who am mad like empty scene of water and willow tree, where the wind hath been, but that foul Satan mad, who rots in his own head and counts the dead, not honest one and two, but for the ghosts they were, brave, faithful, true. When head and air, the earth's clear, green and blue heaven they did share, with beauty who did bid them bear. There now, death goes. Mayhap I've wearied him. Aye, and the light doth dim, and asleep's the rose, and tired innocence in dreams is hence. Come, love, my lad, nodding that drowsy head, 'tis time thy prayers were said.
October 15th, Seattle. Violet, 15 years old. It was announced in the papers tonight that all churches, shows, and schools would be closed until further notice to prevent Spanish influenza from spreading. Good idea? I'll say it is. So will every other school kid, I calculate. The only cloud in my sky is that the school board will add the missed days onto the end of the term. It says that tomorrow, all Seattle will be wearing masks. No one will be allowed on a streetcar without one. Gee, people will look funny, like ghosts. My best friend Raina became so sick, she could hardly walk. When she recovered, I asked her what it felt like to have the influenza, and she said, "Don't get it." November 12th. The ban was lifted today. No more masks. Everything is open. The romance of Tarzan is on at the Coliseum as it was about 6 weeks ago. I'd like to see it awfully. School opens this week, Thursday. Did you ever? As if they couldn't have waited till Monday.
Raggedy Ann's series of children's stories were written by Johnny Rulu for his daughter Marcella, who was often ill as a child. Inspired by Marcella's favorite doll, the first book of stories was published in 1918. Raggedy Ann has been treasured friend to many generations of children, as well as a symbol of caring and generosity. Raggedy Ann and Andy and the Camel with the Wrinkled Knees. One day, Raggedy Ann and Andy were walking in the deep, deep woods when they met their friend, the Camel with the Wrinkled Knees. The camel's legs were so wrinkled and soft that he seemed almost to fall every time he took a step. Raggedy Ann tried to smooth out the wrinkles in the camel's knees, but he smiled and said, "That won't do a bit of good. When I was brand new, I had sticks inside each leg to keep them straight. After a few weeks, the sticks poked through my legs. So the mother of the little boy who played with me pulled them out. Now my knees are saggy and soft." "Maybe you can help us," Raggedy Ann said. "Last night we heard footsteps in the nursery. Now our friend Babette, the French doll, is gone. We don't know where she is." The camel scratched his head with his floppiest leg. "Maybe I can help you," he said. "I think I can find Babette," said the camel, "if I cover my eyes with a hanky and if I run backward to the place where I came from. You better climb up and ride." So Raggedy Ann and Andy climbed up onto his soft flannel back. The camel started walking slowly, then faster until his wobbly, wrinkled legs were hitting the ground, clumpity, 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 and he was running surprisingly fast. But then the camel stopped suddenly, and Raggedy Ann and Andy fell over the camel's nose. The camel sat down on his back legs and sighed. Raggedy Andy suddenly pointed into the woods. "Look, pirates! Maybe they have our friend." He pointed to a large tent not far away. Very, very quietly, the dolls and the camel crept up to the tent. They peeked into a small hole. Inside were 12 large pirates with mustaches. And in the corner, all alone, stood Babette. "Ha," said one pirate, "I am the bravest pirate around here." "We all are the bravest," said all the other pirates. "I'll be fighting in a few minutes," whispered Raggedy Andy. Then he picked up a small stone and threw it softly into the tent, so it bounced off one pirate's shoe. "Ow!" the pirate hollered. "Who hit me?" Raggedy Andy threw another tiny pebble. The pirates decided that it would be safer outside the tent. There was a jam at the doorway, and all the pirates all fell in a tangle of arms, legs, and heads, pulling the tent down with them. Raggedy Ann quickly reached under the falling tent and found Babette. She was unhurt and very happy to see her friends. The camel with the wrinkled knees turned to the pirates who had just stopped fighting. "Now you must promise to reform and not be pirates anymore, and then I'll give you each a lollipop." He held 12 lollipops high up in the air so the pirates could not reach them. "I'll stop being a pirate and be a plumber," cried one pirate. I'll stop and go into the garage business, another pirate shouted. When all the pirates had said, cross my heart, the camel gave them each a lollipop. Then all the three dolls, the camel, and the pirates all climbed into the pirates' flying boat, and it jumped into the sky and sped away. Soon the boat came to rest in the dolls' backyard. Raggedy Ann, Raggedy Andy, and Babette said goodbye to their new friends and crept into their playroom, where all the other dolls were sound asleep. They climbed into their beds, bounced up and down once, and smiled. Then they too fell sound asleep.
Hope's Highway, published in 1918, was written by Sarah Lee Brown Fleming, Brooklyn's first Black schoolteacher and a community activist. It tells of a young Black man falsely accused and jailed, a white woman who helps bring him justice, and her skeptical husband, who eventually comes to understand the inherent racism in America. As you listen, remember that these words were written in 1918, not 2018. First, we'll hear from Grace on her first visit to the South. The next day, Grace, sitting at her window at the hotel, was startled by a heinous yell. Looking out, she saw 4 white men dragging a poor Negro to the park, which faced the hotel. On their trail, 1,000 whites followed, crying at the top of their voices, "Lynch him! Lynch him!" She had heard and read much of lynchings, but never thought she would witness such a barbarous scene enacted by her own people. Yet here was a poor fellow, perhaps innocent of the crime with which he was charged, being brutally killed without being able to utter one single word in defense of himself. Quickly, they strung him up to a tree and, daubing his body with pitch, struck fire to him. In telling of the fiendish deed afterward, Grace said, "The sight was too brutal for words. Soon the sizzling and crackling of the fire could be heard, and the smell of human flesh was stifling. I wanted to satisfy myself that real people were implicated in the deed, but as I looked upon the upturned faces, it seemed as if the spirit of humanity had fled from that mob, and in its stead a living devil was implanted." Grace's husband, Fred, is initially more prejudiced than his wife, but begins to change his view after attending a farmers' conference where Black and white farmers share experiences and help one another. His friend Jerry explains. "This settlement," said Jerry, "is one of the most progressive in the South. The Negroes are very energetic, and this section produces larger crops for its size than any other known settlement." "How do you account for this unusual progress here?" asked Fred. "Well, I suppose the main thing is that these people get better treatment. That is, there are fairer laws and a better spirit on the part of the authorities here than elsewhere. It's only a matter of human treatment after all. The better you treat a horse, the more he will love you and the more devotedly he will serve you." "Well, who attends these conferences and what good is derived from them?" asked Fred. Jerry replied, "Well, as I said, a mutual feeling exists between the races down here on matters of mutual concern. All attend the conferences and one gleans information from the other's experiences. They feel that where race hatred is the least bitter, more good will be developed. As you know, hatred, be it of races or individuals, retards progress. That is why I feel that the South is behind the North, because it spends a good bit of its time and valuable energy trying to crush the Blacks politically and otherwise." And finally, we'll hear from Tom, the young Black man who, with help from Fred and Grace, is freed from the false charges that incarcerated him. With their help, he goes to England, where he studies at Oxford and becomes quite comfortable and prosperous. But he decides to come back to America, knowing that his life won't be as easy there. As he explains, "Duty calls me across the seas to my oppressed and forsaken people. I must go and serve them. I must spend my days in lifting them out of their ignorance so that their condition may be altered. I shall go to my people, taking these European ideals, which I trust shall ever be a part of me. And my prayer to the Almighty shall be for the strength to bear uncomplainingly the scourge of prejudice, which, because of unfair laws, has been allowed to run wild in my native land. I come back to you, my country, which I love and revere. You have unjust laws. You are unfair to my people. But I believe in your future. I have faith in you, though you mete out partial justice to me and mine. And I believe in your future. For through love only may I and my people hope for a greater freedom."
October 8th, California. Blanche to dear friend Barbara. I suppose the picture shows and all places of amusement will open up next Sunday. Everything sure seems dead. We and the baby all had it, and I sure thought I was going to croak. And the worst part was, everybody was so scared over it, they would not go to see anyone.
November, Utah. Helen Viola writes in her journal, I had a bad headache all day, just felt very uneasy as I found out I had been exposed to the flu. I escaped, but my husband Melvin wasn't so lucky. He's better today. I'm almost sick with worry and loss of sleep. So much sickness and death. The only bright ray of hope and light is the end of the war as peace came this 11th. But because of all the rejoicing and celebrating, this horrible disease has spread everywhere.
Two Extraordinary Women by Martha Mcdowell. Encore Player's own Martha Mcdowell has written a memoir about her mother, who became blind during the 1918 pandemic, yet went on to live an extraordinary life. We join the story when her grandmother was fleeing an abusive relationship in the Philippines. With the help of the man who eventually became her husband, she secretly took her children and boarded a ship to Hawaii. Picture, if you would, a mother of Filipino-Chinese descent boarding a ship with her 4 young children, her oldest son, 2 daughters, including my mother, and a newborn baby boy. In her company were aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and Victoriano, who would later become the children's stepfather. They were with other Filipino families, all looking for a new life in Hawaii, where the men would work on the sugar plantations. Graciana, my grandmother, started this journey with the same trepidation and anxiety, as well as hope for a better life, that any immigrant would have, leaving her home country. The whole family traveled in steerage, which was the bottom level of the immigrant ship. Can you envision having 4 children, including a toddler and a newborn baby, traveling in the confines of steerage? My mom once told us that the family had 1 bowl they passed around for food, 1 bowl for the whole family. These were the conditions my grandmother lived in, all for the hope of a better future for her children. And the dark cloud came. Someone had brought the flu on board, which quickly went through the ship. Most of the passengers became sick. and children were affected the worst. My mother was the only child under age 5 who survived. Her newborn baby brother was among those who died. My poor grandmother. Just thinking about her watching her baby die in her arms is excruciating. She must have been filled with a sense of helplessness and grief and fear for the health of her other 3 children. The only way to dispose of the dead and infected bodies was burial at sea. Was the tiny body wrapped or put in some kind of a bag? How could my grandmother watch her baby being put overboard and into the ocean? I find it unfathomable to imagine. Unfortunately, my mother also became a victim of the influenza, even though she survived. The virus caused my 18-month-old mom to partially lose her sight. The illness also caused an ongoing painful discharge, and by the time they were settled in Hawaii, she was completely blind. So, after leaving the Philippines in anticipation of a better tomorrow, my grandmother arrived in Hawaii grieving the death of one child and having to raise a handicapped child in a new and different place. What a whirlwind of emotions and thoughts she must have had as she started her life in Hawaii. How my grandmother overcame the devastating effects of the 1918 flu epidemic is beyond my understanding. But I do know this much. She was a woman who suffered greatly, yet was able to survive with resolve and perseverance. And I have observed those same amazing traits in my mother during my lifetime as her daughter. My mom overcame, with tenacity, the numerous challenges due to her visual impairment. She succeeded in everything she put her mind to, including earning bachelor's and master's degrees and a teaching credential, raising a family of 6 daughters with my dad, and being a blind teacher to sighted students in Napa, the first in that community. Though she was a victim of the 1918 flu pandemic, I can attest that she never perceived her blindness as a stumbling block, and I never heard her once complain about the fact that she was unable to see. 2 absolutely extraordinary women, Graciana and Dolores, my grandmother and my mother, both proving this quote: extraordinary people survive under the most terrible circumstances, and they become more extraordinary because of it. I am so grateful for the rich legacy that they both left for my sisters and for me and for the generations in our family to follow.
Pale Horse, Pale Rider was published in 1939. It was written by Catherine Ann Porter, inspired by her own life experience. In 1918, she nearly died of the virus, leaving the hospital frail and bald. Her hair grew in white, which became her trademark look. The story is about the relationship between a newspaper woman, Miranda, and a soldier, Adam. Miranda becomes sick and delirious, but recovers, only to find that Adam has died of the disease, which he likely caught while tending to her. The title is from Revelation. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are the conqueror on a white horse, war on a red horse, famine on a black horse, and death on a pale horse. "I've got your medicine," said Adam, "and you're to begin with it this minute." "So it's really as bad as that," said Miranda. "It's as bad as anything can be," said Adam. "All the theaters and nearly all the shops and restaurants are closed, and the streets have been full of funerals all day and ambulances all night." "But not one for me," said Miranda, feeling hilarious and lightheaded. She sat up and beat her pillow into shape and reached for her robe. "You're running a risk," she told him. "Don't you know that?" "Never mind," said Adam. "Take your medicine," and offered her 2 large cherry-colored pills. She swallowed them promptly and instantly vomited them up. "Do excuse me," she said, beginning to laugh. "I'm so sorry." Adam, without a word and with a very concerned expression, washed her face with a wet towel, gave her some cracked ice from one of the packages, and firmly offered her 2 more pills. "This time last night, we were dancing," said Miranda. Her eyes followed him about the room. Now and again he would come back, and slipping his hand under her head, would hold a cup or tumbler to her mouth, and she drank without a clear notion of what was happening. He pulled the covers about her and held her and said, "Go to sleep, darling, darling." Almost with no warning at all, she floated into the darkness, holding his hand in sleep that was not sleep. Strolling, keeping step, his stout, polished, well-made boots setting themselves down firmly beside her thin-soled black suede. They put off, as long as they could, the end of their moment together, and kept up, as well as they could, their small talk that flew back and forth over little grooves worn in the thin upper surface of the brain. Things you could say and hear clink reassuringly at once, without disturbing the radiance which played and darted about, the simple and lovely miracle of being 2 persons named Adam and Miranda, 24 years old each, alive and on earth at the exact same moment. "Are you in the mood for dancing, Miranda?" "And I'm always in the mood for dancing, Adam." But there were things in the way, and the day that ended with dancing was a long way to go.
December 10th, Kansas, from Myrtle. Dear Aunt and family, Ralph and I are fine and have not gotten the flu, although it is pretty bad down here. It seems to be among the older folks and children. Heard you folks had it, but hope you are over it and feeling fine. Ralph is still in the barracks. He is looking to be discharged any day, although they have been waiting for a physical exam before he can get out of the Army. The boys here will be pleased to get out too. I try to see Ralph once each day. I go to the barracks and he comes out. We got a letter from the folks at home, and the flu is awful bad around there now. I like it fine down here, although it is a different life in town than in the country.
The song, "I'm Always Chasing Rainbows," was written by Harry Carroll and Joseph McCarthy, with a melody adapted from Chopin's Fantasy Impromptu. It was first introduced in the Broadway show Oh Look, which opened in March of 1918, but closed in fewer than 3 months because of the pandemic. At the end of the rainbow, there's happiness, and to find it how often I've tried, but my life is a race, just a wild goose chase, and my dreams have all been denied. Why have I always been a failure? What can the reason be? I wonder if the world's to blame. I wonder if it could be me. I'm always chasing rainbows, watching clouds drifting by. My schemes are just like all my dreams, ending always chasing rainbows, waiting to find a little bluebird in vain.
Although the Spanish flu is still being studied today, there is no one consensus on its origins, nor how it died out. No antibiotics or antiviral drugs existed then, and the virus likely mutated to a less deadly strain in order to preserve its hosts. And eventually, people just became immune. While the healthcare industry gained large profits during the pandemic, the entertainment and service industries reported severe losses, similar to now. A study conducted this year found that the cities who implemented early and extensive measures to stop the spread suffered no additional economic losses compared to those that implemented late or not at all. Seems we didn't learn from the Spanish flu. And in fact, it has been called the forgotten pandemic. COVID-19 and its lessons don't have to be forgotten, nor do we have to dwell only on the negative impacts. It can be argued that it takes a global catastrophe to put things in perspective. Many policies have been and will continue to be exposed as detrimental because of this crisis, and many changes will be made on a global scale. But there have been innovative and positive changes as well. Small businesses are able to hang on mainly because of social media and online sales, and even new types of service industries have been formed. People have had to devise new creative ways to get what they need and how to deliver those things, and many of the old ways will likely not come back. Businesses are discovering that work from home is more cost-effective, provides better work-life balance, and is better for the environment. Even we in the performing arts have discovered new, innovative ways of presenting the arts. There are countless stories of charity, generosity, and sacrifice coming out every day. We are learning what it really is to be connected. If not for COVID, we might have not discovered these ways to strengthen connections, and we would not have fully realized how strong that need is. Let's hope we remember these lessons for the remainder of our lives. The Spanish flu may be the forgotten pandemic, but we hope COVID-19 will be the dawning of a new day. So please, learn from the past, wear your masks, keep your distance, and stay healthy. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Okay, I'm gonna switch to gallery view. That way everybody's on screen here. Okie dokie. All right, thank you and bravo. Thank you to Meredith, to Tim, Grare, Lea and Donna, Pat, Judy, Martie, Marsha, Lesleyann, and Maya. See, I didn't miss anyone, right? Okay, so now, first, I shared a link on the chat. So to take a short survey, so everyone, if you can access that after the program. But for now, we have some time for questions. So open up your chat and type up your questions for our panelists. Questions or comments? Yeah, we got one here from Barber, from Joy Milson. Thank you all. From another comment, yay, great presentation, great show. Awesome job, everyone. Thanks, everyone, that was really fun. Any questions about the pandemic of 1918? Anything? Looks like we got someone. Yeah, Janice, go ahead and are you able to, Wendy and Ellison, are you able to type your question? Okay. So we got here a question for Maya. Okay, we got, no, first here from Jean. How did you research the material? Anybody want to take that on?
Well, several of us did some research. I looked up top 10 literature, like what was on the bestseller list in 1918, and got some ideas from that. I know Meredith did a lot of research on the facts about the pandemic. Lea and Donna did their own research on the letters. So there were a number of us, and we had conversations about which of these things we wanted to include.
Yeah, I mean, I have to, give a lot of credit to Google, but I did also write some of what I read as well.
Got a question here for Maya. Did you also play the piano for your song?
No, it was a recording that I stole from someone else. Yeah.
Here from a comment from Donna. The similarities between the 1918 flu pandemic and COVID are astounding. Thank you for bringing this to the community. All right.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah. That's not our Donna. That's not Donna.
Another Donna.
Another Donna. Let's see.
Another thing we found out in doing the research is that pandemic also was, we had people fighting overseas. It was global. And there was also race relations issues, marches, et cetera, at the same time. So there were a lot of things that, not just the flu, but a lot of worldwide events that were also similar to right now. So that was very interesting.
I know Janice and Wendy have your hands up. Are you able to type your question on the chat by any chance? So we can get your questions. Okay, you got a question here from Mary Jo. Lea and Donna, how did you narrow down the letters you chose to read tonight?
Well, we tried to do a cross-section of parts of the country and the ages of the people. So we had from 15 years old to much older, a doctor and mothers. For all the readings, I think we wanted to have literature from novels. We wanted facts. We wanted the words of real life people, and also the memoir from our own Encore players person. Lea?
Well, Donna basically found all the letters. We traded a couple times and changed them up a few times, but she did all the finding. I can't take credit.
Okay, we got a question here from Mark. How did 1918 pandemic impact the political movement? Was the next president more left or right?
Well, I mean, FDR was president during it, but I couldn't tell you who was president. It's too long I've been out of school. But I can't really answer that, but I will give a little tidbit here of information that he actually did contract the Spanish flu, and the government kind of kept it under wraps until they knew that he was going to recover. So kind of interesting. Yeah.
I think you misspoke on which president?
FDR was the one who got the Spanish flu.
I don't think so. I think it was Marsha, that was the one you were thinking of doing. Wasn't it Woodrow Wilson?
Oh, you could be right.
Wilson was in office in 1921. I think you might be thinking about Teddy Roosevelt. I can't remember when he was in office. I don't know. I can't remember.
Well, Woodrow Wilson I know people blamed him, but they blamed him for everything. Oh, the recession. That was the other thing that was in common too. Recession, yes. Yeah.
Okay, obviously I need to go back to school.
Okay, this one's for Grare. Was there a symbolism to what you were reading?
That's a loaded question. My mother read the entire series of The Land of Oz to me as a child, and I delighted in them. I went back and did my research and found The Tin Woodman was one of the top novels of 1918. Reading it as an adult, yes, there is a lot of political symbolism. And at this point, I think I'll take the Fifth Amendment. But there is a lot. I had not realized how much, but oh my, yes. And maybe it had something to do with my choice of readings. But again, the Fifth Amendment.
We had I have a nice comment here from Janice Diane. She says, "That was superb. It is so great just to see all of your faces. Thank you all. Just a short story of my own. My father was born August 10th, 1918. He was the seventh child. My grandmother became ill from taking care of several of his siblings and his father, so she had to farm her baby to a couple who lived far out in the country where he would be safe. All of his family survived the pandemic." Thank you, Janice. And this one's a comment from Dream. We got a comment here that just says Wilson, so maybe it's, and then Steve and Irene says Woodrow Wilson was the president during the pandemic and Warren G. Harding was president after.
Yes.
All right.
Paul, Donna, can you hear me? Paul, Donna, Marty?
Yeah, go ahead, Judy.
I just want to thank you for letting me participate in this. And I got it on my cell phone, and my brother and sister-in-law said something, and it really makes me feel good. You know, that they got to watch it. And my mother's mother died in the epidemic in England. And we always heard stories about it and everything like that. So it just has brought a lot of family feelings, and I'm just really proud to be part of this show. Thank you.
We have a comment here. Another one about the president. Wilson was president in 1917. FDR may have caught the flu, but he was in a smoother public office. I am very impressed with the Encore players. Yeah, I am too. Let's see. Another comment from Carmen. A bright spot of COVID-19 and Zoom is that I can see my friends in their performance. Oh, I'm in Boston. Bravo. Hey.
Hi, Carmen.
Hello from
Thank you.
hello in
Thank you
Boston.
for tuning in. It's kind of late there right now.
Yeah. That's my very dear friend, Carmen. Thank you for joining. I miss you.
And, another comment from Bill Webster. Thank you for a wonderful evening from Sandy Bonner and Bill Webster. Okay. Oh, I got a question here. What is next for the Encore players?
Well, we're discussing that. We're hoping to do some kind of a virtual performance, fall performance, and we are in the process of reading scripts and hope to have something to tell you soon.
I'm looking forward to that as well. We can have another Zoom event. Okay, so another one from Meredith. Wilson was the one who was president who got sick. Whoops. Let's see. All right. Any other questions? So if you got one other last questions, please type it in the chat. I'm going to share again the link to the survey, our short survey. So love to get your feedback. Okay, well, I want to thank again the Encore players. I'm just so impressed with their performance. Especially, this is our first Zoom event with Encore players, and I can't be more relieved and delighted of how well Zoom held together. Everything went well. No audio or video problems. And it's just an enjoyable show. And I just want to say we had 58 attendees. So I think this is the most we've ever had for this kind of program. So I think Zoom might have something here with Zoom. So maybe it's the way to go. But it's, of course it's always nicer to do this live and have everybody together. But this is great too. We'll have this recording available. I'll be publishing this recording on our YouTube channel, maybe in a few days. And I'll be sharing the link to that to our panelists. And also, so if you're not subscribed to the library's YouTube channel, just go to YouTube and search for Livermore Public Library and subscribe. And with that, we're going to conclude this program. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for attending. And have a wonderful
Thank you to Paul. I will say thank you to Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you to Zoom. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Good night.